Hello, and welcome to week 5 of your top to bottom detox course. Today, we're going to be talking about chemicals in your home and how they can impact your body. And we'll be talking about some really handy hacks to get you through and clean up your house. So let's get started. So I'm going to review this again because the more I review it, the more you'll know. Achieving success requires you to revisit a skill over and over and over again until it becomes your default habit. This is like learning how to drive a car, ride a bike, or learn a new language. We want to make sure we move your information from your conscious mind to the subconscious mind. So our objectives for today are to understand that toxins are ubiquitous and that they gain entry to our bodies through food, drink, inhalation, and direct contact. We want to gain an understanding of how we are exposed to toxins in our home, to learn about various chemicals and their toxic effects, understand labeling laws and greenwashing, and to learn hacks for cleaner living, and to understand the importance of mental health during this process. So testing shows us that we are exposed to chemicals. We've seen it in placentas, we've seen it in embryos, we've seen it in human bodies. I mentioned this last week, but this always stood out to me because perhaps because I feel like we finally had a politician who was looking into this, and then unfortunately it didn't really move any further forward. But I remember in 2006, Jack Layton had his blood analyzed for 102 compounds, and what they found were polychlorinated biphenyls, stain repellents, non-stick chemicals, so those are the perfluorinated chemicals that we saw from TFAL last week, pesticides such as DDT, heavy metals including mercury and lead, air pollutants, flame retardants. And the one thing that really stood out to me was that Jack Layton had said, it's astonishing how many MPs still refuse to make the connection between the products we use today and enduring health effects. So exposure happens everywhere. We've seen this before. The thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't really matter what building you're in. The indoor air tends to be 2 to 5 times more toxic than the outdoor air. So it really does benefit a family to start to pay attention to the paints they select, the furnitures they use, or perhaps buying in the summer so that off-gassing can happen with windows open, the textiles they select, the appliances and the cooking materials they use, the air fresheners, the cleaners, the laundry detergents, the pesticides, and even the toys. There's a condition called sick building syndrome, and this is when you have a group of people that share a space and perhaps the space is contaminated, whether with biological molds or viruses or bacteria, chemical contaminants. Perhaps it's compounded by inadequate ventilation, electromagnetic radiation. I will even go so far as to say psychological factors can impact this, as well as poor lighting, absence of sunlight, poor ergonomics, and poor humidity. What you'll see is you'll have a group of people and they may not be conferring with each other, but they could be suffering independently with non-specific symptoms that gradually get worse. This, from an employee standpoint, this looks like decreased work efficiency and increased absenteeism. So, it's harder to detect in a work office because not everybody is talking about their personal issues. But in homes, you have to be careful because you can have mold contamination and then the whole family can become very sick. And because you can't see mold necessarily, you won't know the cause. So what effect do all these household chemicals have on our body? Why am I sitting here having this discussion with you week after week saying we need to clean things up? So chemicals can impact our hormones. They can be cancer causing. They can affect the nervous system, your reproductive system, or your respiratory system. So hormone disruptors are chemicals that affect the endocrine glands that are in the body. So the endocrine glands are your pituitary gland in your brain. It might be your thyroid gland. It could be your adrenal glands on your kidneys. We have a whole variety of these little glands that are designed to specifically make hormones so that our body can follow certain functions. Well, endocrine disruptors come in and they mimic or partly mimic our naturally occurring hormones. This means that they can come in and bind to a receptor within the cell and either block other hormones from coming in and binding, or interfere with the way that the hormones are controlled in the body. So that cell signaling mechanism that comes next. Two examples of this are brominated flame retardants and phthalates. So we chatted about hormone disruptors last week, and I gave you some examples of how chemicals can act as estrogens in the body and lead to like female and male reproductive concerns, thyroid dysregulation, metabolic dysfunction, and this new term of chemicals being obesogenic, because they can also impact not just your thyroid gland or your female sex hormones or your male sex hormones, but they might impact things like your stress hormones and your ability to deal with insulin. Carcinogenic chemicals are chemicals that can cause or aggravate cancer. And they can be single chemicals on their own or a combination of chemicals that can disrupt cancer-related pathways. One project that brought a lot of information to light was the Halifax project, where they examined 85 widely used chemicals that aren't typically considered carcinogenic. And they found that 50 of these were actually able to affect cancer-related processes. And so they've coined the term complete carcinogens versus partial carcinogens. One carcinogen that we know very well is formaldehyde. These are found in air fresheners, but these are also the same chemicals that we use to preserve bodies after someone's passed away, whether for funeral purposes or for autopsy, for students studying. So when I was in school, we were studying on cadavers that were full of formaldehyde. So you can imagine certain professions really need to be aware of where they're making contact with certain chemicals. Neurotoxic chemicals are comprised of three main groups. You've got your heavy metals and metal compounds, you've got your solvents and other simple organic compounds, and you've got your pesticides, which we chatted about last week, and that's why Roundup and glyphosates are used as your pesticide examples. So these chemicals can damage the brain and lead to developmental and behavioral concerns, most notably in an embryo or in a very young child. Reproductive toxins can affect your ability to reproduce and your sexual function. So I'm not going to read these off for you specifically because they come up over and over again, but you can see we've got some hormone-related disorders, and then we've got some pretty disheartening situations where you can have a tubal pregnancy, miscarriage, or in stillbirth. And in men, you'll see abnormal formation, so the undescended testes and the hypospadias, and you'll see low sperm count and testicular cancers. So developmental toxins can impact physical and mental growth and development of an embryo. And then we have our respiratory toxins. These obviously can affect your ability to breathe. So this is when a toxin is really acidic or really alkaline, and when inhaled, they can affect the nasal passages, the pharynx, the trachea, the bronchi, and lungs. These toxins can cause acute symptoms. So I'm sure you've probably been exposed to a chemical and just kind of felt that pressure or discomfort in your chest. If you have asthma, it might aggravate that. But it can also cause chronic illnesses. So COPD, fibrosis, which is scarring, and cancers. One thing that I thought was interesting is Environmental Defense had put out an article that said asthma rates in children are on the rise, but so are toxic chemicals that we use in our everyday products. One example of a respiratory toxin are the quaternary ammonium compounds called quats, and these are often in fabric softeners and in detergents. So I wanted to use phthalates as an example because they have many toxic effects. Phthalates are what make plastics pliable. So they give plastic a really desirable effect. Sometimes we want to be able to take our cream and actually squeeze it out so we can get our natural cream into our hand. But inevitably, you're going to have some chemicals in that container. So these are a group of chemicals that are used in hundreds of products, from toys to vinyl flooring to wall coverings, food packaging, pharmaceuticals, and personal care products. And phthalates are linked to asthma, attention deficit disorder, breast cancer, obesity, type 2 diabetes, neurodevelopment issues, and male fertility issues. So read that list. We now see that phthalates alone have respiratory, reproductive, hormone disrupting, neurotoxic, and carcinogenic effects. This was seen early on with DEHP, which was one of the first phthalates to be flagged, and it was replaced with DINP. Years later, they actually realized that DINP was equally toxic, and it was linked to male genital birth defects and impaired reproductive function in men. In the past, we used BPA and everything, and I remember before 2008, there was a lot of discussion about this. We discussed it a lot in my courses in my undergrad, but it wasn't until 2008 that I believe it was the Globe and Mail that came out with an article, and they singled it out saying, you know, it's quite toxic, we need to get rid of this. And so manufacturing companies actually replaced bisphenol A with bisphenol S. Now researchers are wondering if bisphenol S is equally problematic. So the important thing here is that it's almost impossible to avoid chemicals entirely, in part because they're just everywhere, but also because of labeling laws. The problem is that companies are not required to label all their ingredients, especially if it's a patented formula, unless there's a known hazard. So they technically just have to say that it's irritating to mucous membranes, or it can be irritating to your lungs, or it's explosive. So regulatory bodies for these companies put the onus on chemical companies to make sure that their products are safe and that they're registering their chemicals properly. But nobody really is checking in on them. And so companies really have a lot of leniency as to how strict they are in terms of transparency. This is why it's important for us as consumers to seek out companies with the greatest transparency, or just make our own. So in our world, chemicals are innocent until proven guilty, which means we wait until they're super toxic, we pick up on the pattern, we do enough studies, and then we realize, oh yeah, we shouldn't be using those products. Another issue with labeling is greenwashing, and I've fallen victim to this over and over again. Greenwashing is the practice of using unsubstantiated or misleading claims relating to a positive environmental benefit or health benefit. They essentially are preying on the willingness of you and I to want to make good, healthy choices for the environment. And so we specifically choose to spend our money on certain companies, thinking that they've got the same great intention of protecting our earth. Turns out it's a trap because, again, of the weak product labeling laws. What you'll see is they'll throw around terms like natural or botanical, eco, green, organic, or it's free from, and it'll give you a whole list of things that it's free from. They'll show images of the earth, a mama holding her baby, or dandelions blowing in the wind, when in all reality, only 5% of the ingredients are actually clean and 95% could be toxic. You'll see this most in cosmetics, food, and cleaning products. Over time, you will get to know that the ingredients, and you'll see what's true and what's not. You'll get more comfortable with certain companies, and you'll start to depend on third-party companies to help assure that we're picking products that comply with standards. In terms of the term organic, it's way better regulated now than it was, but only as it pertains to food. So you might go and see a shampoo and they might say organic because it's got a plant in it, and plants are technically organic and not inorganic. So you need to start asking yourself, how is that made and where does this come from? One thing that I tap into all the time are the Environmental Working Group guides to cleaners, and I've shared that with you. I will say that I've gone into Nature's Emporium, a really great health food store. I bought laundry detergent thinking, oh, this is great. It's a new one. I like the container because I can just press a little button and it comes out the spout. And I got home and again, thinking it was totally fine. One day I went on the guide to cleaners and it was rated horribly. Needless to say, I didn't buy that again. So in our cleaning products and our laundry products, the chemicals around the house, you'll see there's a whole variety of chemicals, many from plastic. Triclosan is an antimicrobial, so it's in a lot of hand soaps and in hand sanitizers. That's a chemical you really want to aim to avoid because triclosan is uh, um, an endocrine modulator, so it'll impact your hormones. Going through the list, I don't need to read everything to you. The idea is that these all can have negative impacts on the body. And I wanted to make a special note about fragrance-free. You need to remember that when you put chemicals together, they tend to have a fragrance, a scent, let's say. And sometimes we want to make that scent smell better, so we add fragrances in. So now we're adding more chemicals. But perhaps we actually don't want any scent and we don't want the fragrance. So what we'll do is we'll add in another chemical to neutralize the smell. So even when you think you're making great choices by getting something that's fragrance-free, especially from the conventional products, you'll find they're not actually cleaner or better for your skin. So what I wanted to equip you with are a bunch of do-it-yourself hacks. So you can go home, put together your own cleaning bin, and start to get going on creating a healthier, cleaner home for your family. Fabric softeners and dryer sheets contain the following chemicals. Benzyl acetate is possibly linked to pancreatic cancer. Benzyl alcohol irritates the respiratory system. Chloroform is a neurotoxin. It's often used in movies to make people pass out. And many of the chemicals are petroleum-based. The frustrating thing is it goes right into our water system. And in the case of dryer sheets or fragrances that are on our clothes when they go in the dryer, they go right into our air. I'm sure you've gone for a walk and you can automatically tell when people are doing their laundry. One special note that I wanted to make is that when you're washing your masks and your kids' masks, make sure that you're using a really clean product, because not only is there off-gassing from this, but you're directly putting it against their face. So you've got direct contact and direct inhalation. Common conditions that the chemicals might aggravate are dermatitis or eczema, and kids will get them often, eczema on the cheeks, and asthma, we know that's increasing, and same with allergies. So as I said before, many soaps and detergents contain triclosan, as well as sanitizers. Do your best to avoid these. So you've got yourself a laundry printable so that you can start to clean your laundry in a cleaner, healthier way. Dry cleaning is another area where there's a ton of chemicals and labeling issues. So conventional dry cleaning will use solvents, most notably perchloroethylene, which is perc again, same kind of chemicals as your Tefal. It's linked to liver cancer, kidney disease, reproductive disorders, and it enters the body through touch and inhalation. The Environmental Protection Agency found that clothes that you pick up from the dry cleaners, if you've got them hanging in your closet or hanging in your room, they are actually off-gassing these chemicals, and they've been declared hazardous because with that off-gassing, it's been detected in human blood and has also been detected in breast milk. So there are some companies that claim to be organic dry cleaners. And again, this is more greenwashing because they're using petroleum hydrocarbons, and they're calling it organic because these petroleum hydrocarbons are coming from the earth, but they're still toxic. So the way they market is that it's environmentally friendly, but the thing we want to bear in mind is that they contain air pollutants and VOCs. Hydrocarbon solvents are associated with a range of adverse respiratory and cardiovascular health effects. This is declared by Toronto Public Health. So there's some cleaning and laundry alternatives. Like I said, I shared those with you. I find when I go on the environmental working group that Aspen Clean has a pretty good presence. Attitude has a decent presence. Ecos does, as well as Wo Nelly. You can make your own laundry detergents. Try and use dryer balls if you're using your dryer. Air out and expose your clothes and your linens to the sunlight and oxygen, because those are amazing natural antimicrobials. One seemingly good option, but it's for the Toronto community, is something called eco cleaners, and they really seem to be a conscious group working to clean linens and your clothing garments in a more, probably the greenest way that I found so far. Now we want to talk about heavy metals in your home. So common ways that we're exposed to heavy metals are lead through toys, cookware, paints, and furniture. Cadmium through cigarette smoke. So if you're still smoking, I beg of you, please stop. And mercury, because mercury will accumulate in large fish. The old mercury silver dental amalgams will leach mercury. Eco lights, again, when you're trying to make a great option, eco lights have so much mercury in it. So if you accidentally break those light bulbs, you really need to be far away. Otherwise, you're exposed to that toxin. So it's recommended that you opt for incandescent lights or LEDs. And at the bottom here, I have a really great video showing how mercury affects the brain. And that's an old video. I remember watching it when I first started as a naturopathic doctor, but it was done at the University of Calgary, and they do a great job of explaining the impact that it can have on your neurological system. And then, of course, there's aluminum. One thing I wanted to say is we know that mercury affects the brain, but I feel like many people don't know that lead really affects your bones. Lead exposure can be slow and insidious, so that you're gradually developing or accumulating lead in your body. And when it happens like this, you really don't know, because it goes and actually replaces the calcium in your bone. So you might start to have more fractures or osteoporosis or poor dental health, when in reality it might have been lead exposure that you've had in your past. So we talked about heavy metals in your home and avoiding certain fish. You want to stick with the smash fish. So these are your salmon, your mackerel, your anchovies, your sardines, and your herring. So I thought I would share with you a sardine and avocado salad. If you don't like sardines, you can always substitute with salmon. Another thing we want to really start to work on are these candles and the sticky air fresheners that you can kind of put in laundry rooms, or the plug-in air fresheners. Fragrances from candles or conventional candles can have lead in the wick of a candle might have lead in it. And then, of course, the candle itself might have fragrances. And fragrances are often proprietary blends, so you can't actually tell what's making up the candle and what chemicals are in there. If you are a lover of certain, not cosmetic, but like bath and body products in the mall, when you go by and you smell all of those scents, I'm just going to encourage you to think about how many chemicals make up all of those scents. Some better alternatives to home fragrances are using baking soda. You can add a drop of essential oil, or just use baking soda open in cupboards and fridges and such to absorb and neutralize odors. You can use beeswax candles. You can use incense, and you can diffuse essential oils, but again, find companies with strong sustainability practices and transparency. One other thing that you can do, and I often think about this when someone's sick in my home, is when you're taking a shower, you can actually just put a drop of essential oil in the corners and allow the steam to carry the fragrances throughout the home. So other pollutants that we want to think about in our home, one is dust. This is a term that we use to describe organic and inorganic particles that accumulate in your home. It's really quite amazing to actually know what you will find in dust. We know that dust can trigger allergies or the respiratory system, but it's because you'll find chemicals like VOCs and pesticides, cosmetic particles, PCBs from plastic. Lead can accumulate in your dust, fabric fibers, pollen particles, dead skin cells, which is what dust mites feed on, and then dust mites themselves and their waste. Mold is another pollutant that you want to be aware of, because mold and their spores can be detrimental to your health as well. And like I said earlier, sometimes you don't even know that mold is an issue because you can't see it, and it can affect the nervous and respiratory systems. And again, leading to really vague symptoms like brain fog and fatigue, wheezing and histamine intolerance, and respiratory infections. In situations like you want to call a building biologist. So I've given you some ways that you can minimize dust and mold in your home so that you can have a cleaner home and fresher air. You want to leave your shoes at the door, opt for wood flooring when possible, clean your house regularly, wash all bed linens and weekly in hot water, keep the humidity level below 55%, dust with a bamboo microfiber cloth, get some indoor plants, and when you're done, open the windows, cross-ventilate, and allow the sun to shine in. Also, to help with reducing the pollution in your home, you want to make sure that you've got good quality pure air purifiers and filters. So in terms of air purifiers, you want to pick the purifier based on your needs. So for example, you might want one that can address viruses or heavy metals, allergens, or VOCs, especially after renovations. Filters and air purifiers will filter tiny particle size. Molds are 10 to 30 micrometers in size, so you want something that can go really small. Yes, you're paying a little bit more for that, but at least you've got the health benefits. And you also want to make sure that the size and the type of air purifier that you're using can actually accommodate the room that it's in. In addition, you want to clean your air ducts regularly, change your furnace filters every 3 months or more often if needed. You can get HEPA filters for your furnace and for your vacuum cleaners. And there are a variety of plants that can remove pollutants from your home, such as formaldehyde, benzene, trichloroethylene, and even carbon monoxide. But if your carbon monoxide detector goes off, please just leave the home. Don't depend on your plants. So again, you've got your cheat sheet for keeping your home nice and clean. The one thing, and probably the most important thing I will leave you with today, is that you really need to do a mental health check. It is easy to look around your home and think, oh my goodness, look at everything that we're exposed to. So please remember, it's not a race. Start with whatever you feel is most urgent. Celebrate the small changes. Be patient with yourself and your family. It is a process. Get your family involved in the learning process. Get them to watch documentaries and read articles, do little challenges amongst yourself, and remind yourself that stressing about what hasn't changed really doesn't serve you. I've been there. And focus on the changes that you are making right now. You will find that you need to go back and do these pollutant cleanups, like cleaning up your home over and over again, because people will give you things. I took something out of my cupboard a few days ago that someone gave us for our Christmas gift that we never used because it's got TFL, but it's literally in my cupboard just occupying space. So you'll have to go back over and over again. We got a candle for free the other day. Again, I had to go through and take all of that out because, like I said, all of these chemicals, they're ubiquitous. It is almost impossible to escape, but you can just do your very best to keep your home clean. So the mental health checklist is on this do-it-yourself home cleaning checklist. So this week's challenge, we're going to keep it small because I want this to be doable for you. Go through your house and eliminate any unhealthy fragrances from your home, whether it's candles, plug-ins, or stick-ons. Throw them in the garbage. You don't need them, and neither does anybody else. And then I'm going to encourage you to just chat with friends, slowly explore oils that you love, candles that you love, and incense that you'd like to burn. And just make sure, again, that they've got good practicing, like that the companies use good practices and transparency, and that they're practicing sustainable use of the plants that they're using, so that you can make sure that everything that you're doing is in line with the 7 generations philosophy. So I will see you next week for our final week. Hope you are well and that you have a great week. And I just encourage you to get going on making some of these changes so that you can be in your home and feeling at peace, knowing that everybody is good and healthy and safe. Take care. Talk to you soon.